Okay, everybody, we are now live on YouTube.
Thank you very much, Karen.
We'll start the meeting in just 1 minute. Okay, if you'd like to start, Councillor Harper.
Thank you very much, Karen. Welcome everybody to this afternoon's Planning and Environmental Protection Committee. Firstly, I'd like to read out the following statement and announcement. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching this live stream of the meeting via the Council's YouTube page. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely. A decision and summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the Council's YouTube page. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and keep their microphone muted except when I invite you to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function in their participant stream. This is the blue hand. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question and then mute it again to allow the officer to respond. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there is always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. I'll begin by doing a roll call of members of the committee, so please, if members can confirm their attendance. Councillor Bond. Not a good start. Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Casey.
Present.
Councillor Hiller.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Councillor Hogg.
Present.
Councillor Hussain.
Present.
Councillor Iqbal.
Present.
Councillor Jones.
Present.
Councillor Rush.
Present.
Councillor Warren.
Present.
And myself, Councillor Harper, as chair. If I could just ask if Councillor Bond comes on, please, Karen, if you just let us know. Okay, we'll now move on to who else we have in attendance. We have Sylvia Bland, the Development Manager, Stephen Turnbull, Planning Solicitor, Nick Greaves, the Highways Officer, and also members of the Democratic Services team. Item 1 then is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have no apologies for absence.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? No, none of those. Item 3 then is declaration to make representation as a ward councillor. No. Item 4 then is the minutes of the meeting from the 30th of July 2020. We've been asked to approve these minutes as a true account of the meeting held on the 30th of July 2020. Can I ask for a proposer and a seconder, please?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Councillor Hiller propose. Seconder, please.
I'll second.
I've got Councillor Brown. Thank you very much. Okay. Any objections at all? No, then the minutes are agreed. We'll now move on to the next item, which is the minutes from the 1st of September 2020. Again, we have been asked to approve the meetings as a correct record. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Again, happy to propose, Chair.
Councillor Hiller proposing.
Happy to second.
And Councillor Hogg seconding. Thank you very much. Any objections at all? No, none of those. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 5.1. This relates to Acorn Lodge, Kennels and Cattery, Thorney Road, I, Peterborough. Could I ask, please, Sylvia, for you to introduce the item?
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is an application at the Acorn Lodge, Kennels and Cattery. The application itself is for proposed replacement staff facilities, a vet room and 1-bedroom staff accommodation. Okay, if we turn to the next slide, And this slide shows the location of the catteries and kennel. The site itself occupies the land surrounded by the red line, but the wider site includes all the buildings that you can see in that area that lie between the A47 to the north and the Thorny Road to the south. Okay, the aerial photograph that will follow next, I think, gives a good indication of the extent of the buildings that are currently present on the site. These include a bungalow just to the right of the main entrance to the site, but the other buildings relate to the Cattery, Kennels and grooming business that all take place from the site. The next slide shows the view looking towards the site from I. It shows the side boundary, and you can see there on the left-hand side the roof profile of some of the existing buildings and a thick leylandii hedge that screens the part of the side boundary. You can see a flag which marks the entrance to the site, and the next slides will show you the entrance. And this is a slide from Thorny Road looking towards the site itself, with the roof profile of the bungalow on the right-hand side of the picture. This is a further slide, again showing the roof profile of the bungalow, and again you can see the boundary treatment to Thorny Road comprises a brick wall with a leylandii hedge above that. The entrance to the site is marked by the two flags. This view is from the A47 and it looks towards the rear of the site. And again, you can see a number of single-story, low-rise buildings within the site, and then the bungalow to the rear, which stands slightly higher than the other existing buildings. Okay, this slide here shows a comparison between the location of the existing building on site, which is on the left-hand side. It is a small storage building, and it's proposed that that would be replaced by a new two-story building. And what you can see from this slide is where it would be located within the main body of buildings within the site. This is an entrance that is not currently used that shows a good view towards where the proposed building would be located. As you look between the brick wall through the iron gate, you can see a single-story building. The proposed new building would be located to the back of that, to the rear of it, within the main body of the site. To the bottom part of this slide, you can see the elevations of the existing building, which are single-story in nature. And then the images that you have to the top of the slide show the proposed new building, which would be two-story in height, and it would have windows to the ground and the first floor elevations. The elevation on the right-hand side, the top right-hand side of the slide, shows a blank elevation, and that would be the view from Thorny Road, obviously with a building in front of it, as we saw in a previous photograph. Again, the lower floor layout shows the existing building, which comprises a store and a staff room. The images above show on the ground floor that this would comprise a staff room again of a larger size with a vet room at ground floor, and then at first floor that would comprise living accommodation, a single bedroom, bathroom, and a combined kitchen, lounge and diner. Now, the main issues in relation to this application are in respect of planning policy. As you'll see, the application was called in by Councillor Simons, who feels that this proposal would be of benefit to the business on the site. Consultation responses do not raise any particular issues with the application, but as you'll see from the report itself, the policy issues that are of concern are those of LP11 and also LP4. The council's policies seek to direct new residential development to the built-up areas and to restrict single dwellings within the countryside. Given that this site is outside of the settlement of Eye, it's about 400 metres from the boundary of Eye and about 1,000 metres from the centre of it. This would be classed as open countryside, despite the fact that there are existing buildings on the site itself. And for this reason, it would be contrary to policy LP11. There are certain exceptions listed within LP11, and as you'll see within the report itself, we don't consider that the application sufficiently demonstrates that it would meet those exceptions. In particular, as the main reason for the living accommodation is to allow staff to stay overnight. This is as a result of contracts that the applicant has with the RSPCA and also with the police to take in rescue animals, and they obviously would need special care throughout the night. This is normally carried out by the owner of the business who lives on the bungalow on the site. On those occasions when they are away or not available, then the purpose of the accommodation is to allow a member of staff to stay on the site and to carry out work with the animals. But this has not been justified on a full-time basis. As you'll see within the report, it is required on occasion, but not to such an extent that it requires a full-time worker. And that is one of the reasons why it's not considered to comply with LP11. We also feel that it doesn't comply with policy LP4, which supports businesses subject to a number of criteria. And one of those is that it should not affect the character of the surrounding area. As we saw from the photographs, the buildings on site are mainly single story and are quite low in height, given that they're providing accommodation for cats and for dogs in the main. The highest building on the site would be 6 metres in height, and that would be the bungalow. The 2-storey building that is currently proposed would be 6.6 metres in height, and therefore it would be higher than those surrounding buildings. And for that reason, we feel it would appear incongruous in the landscape of the area. So for these main reasons, the application is recommended for refusal on 2 grounds. First of all, being situated in the open countryside, and that it's not been demonstrated there is a substantiated need for an additional worker to reside on the site, or the financial information to demonstrate the viability of the business, and that there's a full-time worker required, and also the impact of the development on the character of the area. In relation again to policy LP4 and other more detailed policies of the local plan. Over to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Okay, we've got one person ready to speak. Can I invite Mr. Ian Gowler, the agent, please, to come on? Are you there, Mr. Gowler?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Hello, Mr. Gowler. Welcome to the committee meeting. You'll have 5 minutes to address committee when you're ready. Within about 30 seconds of the end of your time, you'll be reminded by Democratic Services. Okay. So when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, members, for letting me have this opportunity to discuss this application. Mainly, I just wanted to mention a few things about the actual application in terms of what its use is for and the reasoning behind this application as it is in front of you. The use of the proposed staff flat, as mentioned, is purely for a temporary member of staff to take over if the applicant and the business owner can't be available to provide that 24-hour service. At present, he has got various people, either family or existing members of staff, to provide that cover, but they always have to either stay or use his bungalow for that purpose, which he feels is not really appropriate from a privacy point of view, and also especially in times as we're in at the moment, obviously that's hopefully only short term. The reason some people need to be there is as mentioned, the RSPCA and police require their services 24 hours a day for taking over animals, pets, if either strays are found, or sometimes in the case of people are taken ill and therefore their animals need to be taken into care at any time of day or night. This is intermittent, as obviously it's not something that can be pre-planned. So some weeks there may be no 24-hour calls. Some weeks there could be every night. So someone may be required to take in that animal. Therefore, it's not really appropriate to use an on-call system or a permanent overnight staff arrangement, because it is so intermittent, and the business owner living there provides that service normally anyway. But in the event of a holiday, or in wanting to go out for the evening, one of the existing members of full-time staff that they provide can then provide this cover. The reason for a sort of a more formal flat is that, for example, if the business owner was to go away for a week or two's holiday, that permanent member of staff that is already employed by the business would obviously sleep in that accommodation for those 2 weeks, and during the day they would be expected to provide their normal daily work. Therefore, they need obviously sleep to be able to provide their normal day pattern. Other instances of this it's a bit extreme, but I would more use it as an example of like a fire service where they're on call, but they may not be needed all night, and therefore they can quite happily go to sleep until they're needed. They also provide a service to emergency services and armed services for if they have an emergency call out, for instance, and they need to take their pet in to be looked after while they attend that emergency. They also provide that as a 24-hour service, but it's only for those kind of blue light services. Just picking up on something in the report, the officer has mentioned about the 2-story building. Unfortunately, I've not been made aware of that was so much of an issue. If we'd have been made aware of that either on the previous application or in discussions earlier in this application, we could have come up with a slightly different design, maybe lowered the height of the roof, lowered the eaves so that the overall height would be more in keeping with the existing bungalow or the large kennel building that's just behind. One of the other things is using existing buildings for providing this kind of accommodation. All of the buildings are currently in use, and one of the things is providing a vet room, which at present they use an existing dog kennel or other buildings, but at the moment they're all fully used, so we need that extra accommodation. Also in the officer's report, it mentions about potentially providing accommodation, say an annex, I'm reading into it, off the back of the existing bungalow to provide this accommodation.
Your time is up, Mr. Gowler. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Questions then for Mr. Gowler? Councillor Hiller. You're on mute, Councillor Hiller, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me, Mr. Gowler?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for responding. Couple of points. You've just mentioned that had you been aware that the height of the proposed construction was an issue, it's an issue under policy LP4, you would perhaps have redesigned the proposal to be more in keeping with the height of the bungalow. Can you just confirm that that is a possibility that you're willing to investigate, please?
Thank you. Yes, lowering the eaves of that particular building wouldn't affect the overall layout. We could still provide the accommodation we needed within that area. Yeah, if we can even potentially changing some of it to maybe single story if that's needed.
Okay, thanks for confirming that. You'll appreciate, of course, that we as a committee are looking at what's in front of us currently with your current and existing application. So we can't actually alter the application for you, but it's interesting to note that you would be willing to do that. You also touched on the issue of increasing the size of the bungalow to accommodate the facilities that are apparently required. Are you saying that's completely out of the court? It appears from the site plan, and I've Google Earthed the site myself, and it appears there's a reasonable amount of space around the bungalow. Is that something your client wouldn't consider?
Yeah, it reads in the report that we could potentially provide almost an extension to the bungalow to provide an annex for staff accommodation. It's just we've got to provide this new building for staff accommodation and vets, so it kind of made sense, economic sense, to build over the top of the staff accommodation rather than building a completely separate building attached to the bungalow, albeit it's all on the same site, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you very much. But when you say a completely separate property, it's a matter of meters away from the existing facility, isn't it? So
yeah,
it is, for all intents and purposes, within the same, dare I suggest, compound arrangement that the Kennels and the Cattery has. Okay, fine. That's enough from me. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Gower.
Thank you. Councillor Item.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Mr. Gower, what evidence has the applicant given to substantiate the need for an additional worker?
This wouldn't be an additional worker over the top of what they're staffing already. So again, at the moment, when the applicant goes out for the evening or away on holiday, one of their existing senior staff who has the right qualifications for providing kind of the sickness cover, they would attend overnight, stopping in the applicant's bungalow. So it's not an additional member of staff, it's the use of one of the existing full-time members of staff.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Okay, what financial information did you provide to demonstrate that the business could fund the proposal work and employ an additional full-time member? Because that's in the refusal. So I think I need a bit of clarity on both of those issues.
So you like financial documents to prove the business viability and the work, and we haven't provided that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg.
So just to sort of clarify some of the points that have just been raised. So essentially what you're saying is that you took the opinion that you'd rather build on top of an existing building than take up space that was already being used for, say, exercising the dogs of the fields to the right of the property to extend. So essentially, you were not taking up any more land space as such with this development. You were going on top of an existing building. Is that right? Yeah,
it's obviously more economic to build a first floor rather than a separate building. We've already got foundations and everything, so we're only on a roof. We're obviously providing the extra floor. The location of this is also more centralised in the kennel arrangement and nearby to their office. So although it's only a small area anyway, it's kind of more central, but it's more economic sense to use a single story building and use the space over the top.
And secondly, so you've made it clear that there is no extra person being employed. This is just to facilitate an existing employee to be able to use this facility in the circumstances that you've outlined in terms of, so it is not for permanent occupation. It's only for occupation on an ad hoc basis or a rotational basis. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, just to prevent the need for one of the existing members of staff needing to use the applicant's private bungalow to stay overnight if in those circumstances. There's no intention at all for it to be a permanent flat. We're happy for any restriction to be put on if need be to restrict that just to that circumstance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else got any questions on that? Could I just read something out to you, please, Mr. Gowler, just and ask for your comment? If you, I'm sure you're aware of most of these, but just to refresh your memory on our policy LP 11 Part D, it says that new dwellings in the countryside, permission for permanent dwelling in the countryside for an agricultural worker would only be granted to support existing agricultural activities on well-established agricultural unit, subject to the demonstration of a functional need which cannot be met by an existing dwelling or conversion. What's your comments? What's your comments on that particular statement in our policy?
We're not looking at a separate dwelling. We absolutely do not want a separate dwelling. We don't think it's appropriate for it. And under that policy, that's more for if you're looking for a permanent dwelling. I read that. We're not looking for that. It wouldn't be appropriate for there to be a dwelling in that location with the nature of the kennels, the noise and everything. It's purely for a business building, really. We want just a temporary use on those occasions that we've identified that a member of staff can stay, not looking for a separate flat or dwelling, which is where the sort of slight complication comes in with this application.
So you don't consider it a dwelling, what you're proposing?
It's more a hotel room, a very occasional need. So it's not a full-time. A dwelling would then be occupied 24/7. It's not what the applicant's looking for. It's just that occasional business need for a member of staff to stay there to provide the services. So it's not a separate dwelling we're looking to apply for, really.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks for that. Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Chair. It's really on the same point. It's the reason for refusal number one, and it's, when you say that no financial information has been supplied, were you aware that was quite a big deal not to provide that, and the implications of not providing it?
No, it was the financial need to prove that you need a member of staff on site for a new residential dwelling under those agricultural workplace home kind of situation. But we're not, this is where the complication is we're not looking for the financial records would show that they don't need another member of staff. They've got the staffing they've got is what they need. It's just we don't need a dwelling to support that business. The dwelling's already there. It's just this occasional need for that member of staff to stay overnight when the business owner, the applicant, can't provide that in their own dwelling.
Councillor Casey, got anything else?
No, I think that gives us a question for officers later on and for our debate as well.
Truly. Anybody else got any questions at all for Mr. Gowler? No. Mr. Gowler, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Okay. Let's just move on then. Right. The next stage is then, is there any questions then for officers? So we're going to move to that. So Councillor Hogg first, please.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions. On the plan that from the first slide, it shows a kind of L-shaped cutout for the site. Can you explain why that there is it described as such and not for the whole site Why is there that definition with the L shape? Can that be explained?
I would say that is because that is the red line that the applicant proposed. We have simply copied the red line from the application plans, and they go around the site of the proposed building, and then it connects then to a public highway. I believe that would be the thinking.
Okay.
That's
So
unusual.
there's no plan to separate the site at all. Is where I'm going with this, really.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is an application that has been proposed by the applicant a number of times. You'll see from the planning history, there's been some previous applications. In the earlier applications actually showed a proposed dwelling on a green part of the site, close to where the access would the access that's not currently used is located, and that would have had the potential for being separated off as a dwelling in itself with its own garden, its own access. I think we sought to overcome the issues that we had with that location by proposing the building now within the main business part of the site. So it would be more difficult to hive this off and use it as a separate dwelling with its own access, because it would be enclosed on two sides by other kennel buildings, and it would also have the staff room and the vet's room beneath it. So in answer to your question, yes, it would be more difficult to separate this out as a dwelling and to be sold off separately from the rest of the business.
So my next question is it possible to have a condition whereby, so similar to, I believe with static caravan sites, they have a situation where they can only be occupied they can't be permanently occupied. So there has to be a period of time where they are not occupied during the year. Would a similar situation, could that be placed on this so that we maintain the temporary aspect of this property rather than a permanent residence? So it would be temporary residence rather than a permanent residence.
I think it would be a bit more difficult to do that on a time limited basis, and indeed we tend not to apply those sorts of conditions on caravan sites either. You know, the ones where they can only occupy them for 11 months of the year and they have to move out for a month. That sort of a condition is not really seen as being very effective or enforceable these days. However, there could be a way of devising a type of personal or agricultural type of occupancy type condition, should members be seeking to go down that route, that would tie the occupation of the person who would use that dwelling to the business itself.
Because what I'm thinking is that there must be plenty of examples of sort of care homes and security sites, etc., where they give provision for somebody to be on call, but are still able to maybe sleep on premises. But clearly, that's not accommodation in a permanent way, and that seems to be where we're going with this.
Yes, that's correct. For security, if there has been a financial and a functional need demonstrated that requires a caravan or a permanent dwelling in order to provide security or assistance to the rest of a business by a full-time worker, then yes, we would attach that to the condition. I suppose what we found with this application is that hasn't been fully demonstrated, and hence the conflict with policy.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Item.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. My question to the officers is that in the refusal decision, it states as an additional member. In the presentation, Mr. Gowler said it's not an additional member. What is the position?
Okay, Ah, right. Okay, you're referring to in the reason for refusal 1. It refers to the need for an additional worker. Yes. I think we would need to refer to the more up-to-date information given by the agent, that it wouldn't be an additional worker, but it would simply be an existing worker on the site.
Okay, one more question, Chair, if I may.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Galloway, in his address, states that no financial information was provided because there was no need to do so. What sort of impact did that have on the decision for them not providing the financial support?
Yeah, I think as the agent has described, it is a slightly unusual application in that whilst the proposal is for a new residential unit on the site, and the plans show that, and that would require that financial information to be provided in order to justify it. I suppose the applicant is arguing something slightly different, that it wouldn't be a unit of accommodation and therefore it wouldn't to be occupied on a permanent basis, and therefore they've not provided that information. Now, in trying to sort of unravel that, we have taken the application on face value that it shows a unit of accommodation and therefore the justification is required. And as it's not been provided, and for the other reasons in the report, that's why we consider it to be contrary to policy.
Okay. Councillor Rush, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sylvia, could you, in your opening statement, you said the highest bungalow at the moment is, I think you said 6.6 meters high?
Yeah, that's right. That's set out in the report. Yes.
Yeah. So the new building is going to be 6.9 meters high. So that's 3.3 of a meter higher than the existing buildings. So is it fair to say in the report that the new building will be a large, monotonous 2-story building? Is that a fair statement?
Sorry, I believe I got my numbers wrong there. In the report, it describes under site description the existing bungalow to be 6 meters in height, and then the proposed new building to be 6.6 meters. So following your line of argument, it would be a difference of 0.6 of a meter. And then, so in answer to your question, yeah, 0.6 of a meter, I suppose, isn't a great difference between one building and another. I think that the reason that we've reached this conclusion is that, as you saw from the elevations, it would be quite a long building, and you'd see that in the context of the other buildings on site, not necessarily the bungalow, but the other Cattery and Kennel buildings, which are much lower than the bungalow itself. So there would be a greater difference between those and the overall height of the proposed building. But it is a judgment, and clearly there are buildings on the site there, and one of the buildings would screen the proposed new building when viewed from Thorney Road. So that is something that the committee do need to take into account, that height difference, and to what extent there would be screening from other buildings on the site.
Thank you. A couple more questions, please, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
What relevance to this application is the statement that there are 59 dwellings are listed for sale in I?
Yeah, it's something that we have to look into when we're dealing with business premises who are seeking a unit of accommodation on the site, that if there are existing buildings, existing properties nearby for sale within I, if there was a requirement for a new dwelling, could a vacant building in I be purchased to accommodate the workers for the purpose of the overnight assistance that is required?
All right, next question. In the access and statement, the access and parking, it says there are no highway issues. So why does it conflict with the local plan?
Because there are other policies in the local plan aside from highway issues. And as you see from the reasons for refusal, the issues are around the conflict with LP11 and LP4, which don't necessarily raise highway issues, but raise other issues in relation to new dwellings within the countryside, or dwellings in association with existing employment uses.
Right, thank you very much.
Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just coming back to this full-time worker and the definition of whether or not this person is a new employee. And it sounds like the judgment is being made as if they're a new employee. And part of what the decision we're coming to is in our minds, is it a new employee, or is it an existing employee, which is what the applicant's agent would say, an existing employee that's being required to live on site temporarily? And how much weight should we give to that, bearing in mind it's one of the, well, I suppose a lot of weight, but you know, is it a non-balance?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it makes a huge difference, to be fair, whether it's an existing employee or a new employee. The issue is around the creation of a new unit of accommodation that's in the open countryside. So it doesn't really matter whether that would be inhabited by an existing employee or a new employee. I don't think it weighs in the balance particularly.
Councillor Casey, you don't?
It was. Can I just come back, because that's also part of that refusal, is the definite, and this is the reason why the applicant hasn't submitted any financial information, is because of the definition of whether or not the employee is a new one or a full-time one or an existing one or a temporary one.
Yeah. The policy doesn't itself refer to an additional employee, it just refers to an employee. So I think that the agent would have been aware that that test for financial justification would apply. So I think it's simply an error in the reason for refusal for stating additional. I don't think that word is absolutely necessary in that reason for refusal.
Councillor Hogg.
So just so I can get a bit of a handle on this, at what point does a building become a residential building compared to a break room with a kitchen and showering facilities for, you know, if you're, you know, a lot of businesses may have a showering facility because you get dirty or what have you, and you need to be able to change. Is it just the provision of a bed? And if they'd just not put the bed in there and said that this was a break room, then this would not have applied. Can you give us some kind of clarification on this?
Oh, well, I suppose in this case, they've specifically provided a staff room at ground floor, and then they've proposed a unit of accommodation above that would have its own entrance door, and it is laid out as if for residential accommodation. So on the plans, it clearly appears like a self-contained flat. Yes, the applicant could have submitted different layout plans that showed a different configuration of rooms and uses, and we would have had to consider that as submitted. But as that is not what's in front of us, I'm not sure I can comment on it further. But yes, there's clearly different ways of laying out the accommodation. The application clearly includes one bed staff accommodation, so it is on that basis that they submitted the application, and that's how we've had to determine it.
Yeah. That's fine. Okay, Councillor Hogg, have you got another question?
Well, it's just a question. So it's whether or not it's about whether or not this is residential. You see, I don't believe from what they've said this is temporary accommodation for somebody to have a facility overnight in extremis, or as part and parcel of, you know, the fact that they've been called out and they need to be on site for dogs that have been, or animals that have been passed to them by the RSPCA. This is not for somebody to move into on a permanent basis. For me, that would be residential, where it becomes their home. This is accommodation for a staff member to use as part of their employment while they are working. That's my confusion.
Okay, fair enough. Right, good. Any other questions at all for officers? No? Okay, then we're going to move on to debate. Who would like to kick that off? Councillor Rush.
Oh, sorry, I thought I still moved. Sorry, Chair. I'm finding it very difficult to see why this application is being refused. The building is on an existing site. It's not using the agricultural land. It's only 0.9 of a metre higher than the existing boundaries. As the applicant says, it's not going to be a permanent building. It's going to be for workers who are on call out, and I can understand why probably the owner of the site doesn't want people staying in his house at this particular moment. So I'm finding it difficult to see why this has been refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg.
Very similar to Councillor Rush. From my point of view, I think that maybe to a certain extent the applicant has maybe not done themselves a great deal of favours in the way that they have framed the application, and that maybe it hasn't been stressed enough that that this was only for temporary use only, and I would support some sort of mechanism to make sure that that was going to be the case, and that there wasn't sort of a change of heart and suddenly somebody was going to be moving in on a permanent basis. But from my point of view, having accommodation available in the vicinity doesn't quite cut it, because from what they've outlined, you need to have somebody on site who might then be able to go and have a rest for an hour and then get back up again and then check on the animals again. If you're going to have to travel from this location to another location and back again, it's almost not worth doing. And ultimately, if you're going to do a night shift, you need to have a certain amount of care for your employees, so that they've got a warm place to be able to rest and have a break. So from my point of view, I think that this, maybe the whole point of this committee is that rules are set down, but then committees are there to look at the individual circumstances around an application and kind of flex those rules accordingly. From my point of view, if it doesn't go through this time, then I think with a bit of tweaking from the applicant, then maybe it should go through. So we might as well put it through this way round straight away. It's up to others, really. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Hogg. I cannot see a problem in passing this application. I mean, the kennels have been there a long time now, and as a ward councillor, I've never received a complaint. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hiver.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't think the applicant, in all honesty, has done himself many favours here, and I can completely understand why our officers are recommending refusal. However, I think our officers are also looking at the letter of the policy rather than perhaps being flexible. And I think this is where, as I am listening to members speaking, we should perhaps factor in a degree of flexibility, Chair. I am personally very stringent in my approach to dwellings in open countryside, as perhaps some of our long-standing members may reflect upon. And we had one, I think, at the last committee meeting with regard to a dwelling in virgin countryside. This is completely different, in my opinion. It isn't a brand new dwelling in an open field. It is part of what I would call a compound arrangement with myriad buildings. We have a bungalow, and just to correct Councillor Brown, it's a 0.6 metre difference between the two buildings. The existing bungalow, as I understand, is 6 metres high, and the new dwelling, which again I don't think the applicant has done himself any favours, is 0.6 metres higher, and he's already said that he would reconfigure that if he was forced to do that. I don't think we need to force him to do that. If we're looking at LP11, one of the main policy reasons cited for refusal, Part D, new dwellings in the countryside, permission for a permanent dwelling in the countryside for an agricultural worker, and I'm terming this as an agricultural, although it's a Cattery and a Kennels, will only be granted to support existing agricultural activities on a well-established agricultural unit, subject to the demonstration of a functional need which cannot be met by an existing dwelling or conversion. Now, we've been told by the agent this can't be met by an existing dwelling for the reasons that it's a private dwelling house. Why would you want strangers, but why would you want workers actually living in your own property if you can avoid it for no other reason than it's inconvenient and there are privacy issues perhaps, or indeed a conversion? And we've spoken about the conversion, which the applicant isn't prepared to do, so we're not actually looking at a conversion. We're looking at this application. Personally, I don't think the material harm warrants a refusal, and I will be supporting this against officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Anybody else want to come in? No, but no other hands up. So, oh, Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Chair. No, I concur with Councillor. I can see both arguments really, and which was why I was questioning on that definition of and it all hinged around the officer's definition of the worker being a sort of and what was going through my mind was Councillor Hiller's description of our previous application, and this is totally different. And I was thinking this isn't about employing someone new on the site and increasing the number of workers on the site. It's actually providing facility where the business can be more efficient really and be able to provide a service. So I'm inclined. Well, no, I will be voting against officer's recommendation and against.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Casey. Anybody else? I think from my point of view, I think I agree with Councillor Casey, well, all of you who've actually been in the debate really. My only thing I think is maybe some sort of condition whoever's going to propose, I take it we're going to get one soon, is that this doesn't become a full-time dwelling, that somebody can't just move in and live there forever, if you know what I mean. It's only there for that reason. So I think if I was going to support the proposal that I'm sure is coming forward, I think I would like to see some sort of condition that said that it couldn't be a home, as Councillor Hogg would have said. That would be my only reservation really. Other than that, I'm happy with the rest of it. Councillor Rush.
I'd like to make a recommendation, Chair, if everybody's finished.
Yeah, hold on a second. Anybody else? No. Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Rush then for a proposal, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make a proposal to go against officer's recommendation and grant this application. Also, if possible, I'd like to put a condition on that. The condition would be to tie the dwelling to the business and not a permanent dwelling. Okay,
Sylvia, does that make sense to you, that proposal?
Councillor Harper, yes, I think that such a condition would be a very sensible option should members be minded to approve the application.
Okay.
I'd also suggest that a condition to ensure that the development is in accordance with the approved plans, which is one of our standard conditions, a time commencement condition, and also one, let's see, requiring that if that contamination work be carried out, should that be found to be an issue. Again, it's a standard condition that we have on circumstances where, you know, it's not clearly identified, but there could be a possibility. And also that materials to be used on the external surfaces is in accordance with the information that was submitted with the application.
Yeah, fine. Councillor Rush, are you happy with that in your proposal?
Yes, I'm happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? I've got Councillor Hogg's hand up.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that in the way that Sylvia Brown has just outlined.
Great, fine. Okay then. So we have a proposal and we have it seconded. I'm going to move now to the vote. Okay, for clarity, I'll ask each member in turn whether you're for, against or abstaining. Councillor Bond.
I'm for.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Casey.
For.
Oh, wait a minute. Just can you just hold?
You've gone offline a minute, Councillor Brown.
I think he wants to change his plea.
I want to change to 4. Thank you.
Right, okay, so we'll go. So Bond is for, Brown is for, Casey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hiller.
Yes, I'm for the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Hogg.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Hussain.
Yes, I'm for the recommendation.
Councillor Iqbal.
For, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Rush, obviously for.
For.
Yeah. Councillor Warren.
For.
And myself, Councillor Harper. Yes, I'm in agreement, so I'm for 2. So Karen, the result, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous to go against the officer's recommendation and to allow the application.
Okay, so that
imposition of conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So that application is agreed based on those conditions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on now to item 5.2, which relates to 7 Enfield Gardens in Netherton in Peterborough. And Sylvia, when you're ready, if you could please introduce the item.
Dan, if we could have the presentation available. Yeah, this is an application to carry out pruning works to a willow tree at 7 Enfield Gardens. If we turn to the next slide, the application relates to a semi-detached property. The tree is within the front garden. The application is made by a councillor, and under the council's constitution, this is the reason why the application has been brought to committee. If we look at the aerial photograph, you can see it's a large tree. It does overhang the footpath and the highway. It has been pollarded in the past, and as we'll see from the next slide, it is due some further pollarding, and that's why the application is being submitted. This is in line with good arboricultural practice, and the application is recommended for approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sylvia. Have you finished now? Have we finished?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
But to make sure I didn't want to cut you short. Okay, so there's nobody registered to speak on this item, members. Any questions at all, please, to any officers? No. Okay, so we'll move on to debate. Any debate? No. Oh, we've got debate. So, Councillor Casey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought I'd bring up that I can remember this coming about 3 or 4 years ago, and we were happy to agree it then. So I'm happy to agree it this time too.
Thank you, Councillor Hiller.
Yeah, hi, Chair. It's a pollarding exercise, which is at this time of the year all over the city. We have many applications in the rural wards, as you might imagine. So, you know, the only reason it's here is because the applicant is member of the council, under normal circumstances, it would be a matter of protocol to accept, given that it will be done professionally. Issues with this whatsoever, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hiller. Councillor Hogg.
Just to say what a magnificent tree it is, but it does seem to be sort of getting a bit out of control from what I can see on Google Maps, and I'm guessing it's grown since then. So yes, it needs controlling, and as previously said, if it hadn't been that this is a councillor's house, it would have just gone through without having to come to committee. So I'm more than happy to approve.
Okay. Anybody else want to add anything before I go to proposal? No. Anybody like to propose then, please? Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that we concur with the officer's recommendation and approve this application.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Iqbal, are you seconding?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Then we have a proposal and a seconder, so we'll now go to the vote. Again, for clarity, I'll ask each member in turn if they are for, against or abstaining. Councillor Bond?
For.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Casey?
For.
Councillor Hiller? Oh, lost you.
Sorry, just unmuting. Yes, for, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg?
For.
Councillor Hussain?
For.
Councillor Iqbal?
For, Chair.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Rush?
For.
Councillor Warren?
For.
And myself, Councillor Harper's chair. Yes, I'm for too. So without going to Karen, I'm pretty sure that's a unanimous vote. If you confirm, please, Karen.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Therefore, the proposal for the work is agreed. Thank you very much. Well, that ends the actual committee meeting. So if we could please come offline